What's up, guys? Rath here, back again with another Rath's Learning Curve. Continuing our series on how to win daily fantasy college football. We're going to hit you up today with tip number 7, I believe. We're on tip number 7. We're going to talk about the importance of Vegas lines in daily fantasy college football, the differences between CFB and the NFL, and what types of games that you're looking to target players in. So let's get into it. The NFL, first off, typically you're going to look at totals in games. That's sort of the first place that you want to look. And typically the range in the NFL in a weekly, NFL season, a week or a season, you're going to have a low of about a 37 is going to be about, you might have a 34. In a given week, going to have totals between around 37 and 50. With the low being about 34 potentially, if you get like teams like the Jets and the Bucks playing each other, or the Jets and the Bills, with a high of about 58, maybe even up to 60 if you get two potent offenses like maybe Dallas and Philadelphia. So those are the extremes, but typically you're going to fall between 37 and 55. It's about, you'll have some outliers. So 32 teams are in the NFL, and you got about 128 in college football. So you got almost 4 times as many teams, which means the spreads are going to be much different. There's greater variance. That's going to mean there's a lot more scoring. I'm going to talk about that. Typically, in a given week in college fantasy football, college football, you're going to see spreads as low as 37. Very rare. You might have a team like UConn playing Wisconsin, or UConn playing Boston College. You would never want to take any of those teams because all they do is run the ball and play defense, and they don't score. Now, your highs are going to be crazy. There are totals that are going to approach 80 plus, and you get teams like Baylor and Marshall and TCU and Texas Tech and Texas A&M, and some of those crazy teams like Western Kentucky, Northern Illinois, stuff like that. But typically, those Baylor games are usually in A&M and Texas Tech. Those Big 12 games usually are the ones that got the crazy totals. So, you're looking at like 80, 85 sometimes in those games. So, definitely circle the games that are pushing 55 plus in CFB in a given week. And those are the ones you want to target first. The second step that you want is look at the spreads that are the lowest. So what you want is try to find any spreads that are, say, like 14 points or less, 7 points or less, 3 points or less, things like that. Because what you're ideally looking for is you want to find players in games that are going to be in the highest scoring games and the closest games. You want action to go back and forth. You don't want to take players from a game where it could potentially be a blowout, because then you're going to be left with no points. So you want to find the games that are going to be the 55, 54, those crazy games. And in the bonus in college football is that if a game goes to overtime and keeps going back and forth with scoring, then your guys are going to have monster points. So that's kind of what we all hope for. We always root for overtime. You get overtime, chances are you're gonna cash. So that's something that you definitely want to be aware of in college fantasy football and college football in general. It's just those overtime things. Look for the highest totals, the smallest lines. You want the closest games possible. You want players in shootouts, because here's the thing: when you got Baylor going up against a team like Tulsa, here's the problem. Now that spread's probably going to be 40. And the total might be 70. But the problem is that if Baylor's winning 42-0, they're going to take all their starters out and they're going to play all their scrubs, which means you guys that you play on Baylor, like Russell, like some of the wide receivers, Cannon, guys like that, those guys are going to be out of the game, and all the backups are going to be in, because the backups, they're going to want to take the stars out. They're not going to want to score 80, and they're also not going to want to get their guys hurt. So that's the danger when you start looking at those big spreads and big totals, is you got chances that the starters are going to get pulled. So stay away from those games. My rule of thumb typically is I try to stay away from anything that's 3 touchdowns or greater. I do try to, depending on the week, I do try to stay away from favorites that are minus 21 or higher. If I can be more selective in a given week, we have a lot of games, things like that, then I'll definitely be a lot more selective. But kind of minus 21, when you start getting minus 28, minus 35, minus 40, that kind of stuff, I mean, look, you can still take players from those games, but you're going to want to really take a risk. Those are more tournament plays for me. Definitely want to stay away from those matchups and cash. All right, guys, that's the tip of the day. Tip number 7, Rath's learning curve, how to win daily fantasy college football. Check us back here later on for another tip. Thanks again.